I'm Heather Marie Montilla, and you're watching PBS Books. Thank you for joining us. PBS Books, in collaboration with WHRO, is pleased to host this conversation with New York Times bestselling and award-winning writer S.A. Cosby, author of All the Sinners Bleed, a novel. PBS Books is proud to partner with the Library of Congress to promote their 2023 National Book Festival. Let's take a moment to hear from the Librarian of Congress, Dr. Carla Hayden.
I'm Carla Hayden, Librarian of Congress, and I want to give a thank you to PBS Books for supporting the National Book Festival. Hope you can join us in Washington and online for this year's festival on Saturday, August the 12th.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hayden. If you live in Virginia or in the DMV area, then don't miss the 2023 Library of Congress National Book Festival. It's on Saturday, August 12th from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. The festival is free and open to everyone. It is a quick drive or train ride away. For a complete schedule of the 2023 Library of Congress National Book Festival, it can be found at loc.gov/bookfest. Also to note that two of the main stages will be live streamed. All content will be available about a week after the festival. You can curate your own experience. Now through August 31st, PBS Books and PBS Stations will host a series of 10 virtual events with 11 authors. They will be available on demand as well on PBS Books and the National Book Festival website. Well, today's conversation features S.A. Cosby to discuss his latest work and involvement in the festival. All the Sinners Bleed features a small southern town's first Black sheriff facing a questionable shooting, a Confederate pride march, and a serial killer. Well, it is quite an adventure. So let's introduce S.A. Cosby. Welcome. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. This is wonderful.
Oh my gosh, it is such an honor to have you here. And you have accomplished so much. You have won the Anthony, the Barry, the McCavity Awards from Southeastern Virginia. You obviously, many people know you for Razorblade Tears, which was on Barack Obama's summer reading list, and also NPR. It just seems like you have won so many awards, been on so many amazing lists, and we can't wait to learn about your latest novel that was just released in July.
Yeah,
Is
it's
that right?
released in June, but it feels like it just came out in July.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Well, to moderate this conversation, we are just super excited to have such a wonderful person. We have Barbara Hamlee. Barbara Hamlee is an award-winning journalist, a television radio host, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice facilitator, and the owner of her own business, Sharing Info LLC. She is best known as the executive producer and host of Another View, a weekly public radio talk show that discusses today's issues from an African American perspective. For 11 years, Barbara held a variety of leadership positions with WHRO Public Media. She is very involved in community, serving as a board member for many organizations, including Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities and the National Center for the Prevention of Community Violence. It's my pleasure to welcome in Barbara.
Hi, Heather. How are you?
Well,
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I am so excited.
We're so excited to have you here, and I'm just going to hand it over to you. I just can't wait to hear more about Sean's book. So enjoy the conversation, and we'll see you on the other side.
Okay, sounds good. Hi, Sean. How are you?
Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. There you are. Technology. What would we do without it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I will tell you, Sean, I wish that you and I were seated under the tree in the backyard of Titus and Marquis, with Titus and Marquis, passing that jar.
That's a good way to while away an evening. I've done that many a times in my
Me
own.
too. Me too. I tell you, reading this book, and honestly, I will tell you this: I read half of it and listened to parts of it on Audible because I had to get through all of it before our interview. But it was just so compelling, and you pulled every emotion out. I mean, I laughed out loud when Titus's father was talking about the rebel, and he said the guy with the eggs, talking about Benedict Arnold. I was screaming in my car. I was driving in my car, and when Titus was trying to decide whether to go and listen to the interview with Kelly, and I'm going, no, Titus, don't go, because I don't want him to mess up his other relationship. You know,
You know
I'm
what's funny?
cringing as
I,
you're.
I I have a lot of really really talented uh female writer friends who I let them
Mhm.
read the early draft of the book, and every
Uh-huh.
one of them was like, he know he ain't got no business going to that girl house at 10 o'clock. So
I was just like, come on, bro, don't go. Because Arlene is such a sweet person, and you already knew how insecure she was to begin with, and then and that's part of some of the Southern charm, even though Southern women are fierce. Don't get me wrong about that, but they tend to step back a little bit, especially if someone's coming from the quote unquote big city, and so you already knew she was going to have that kind of a conflict. But let me ask you this: how do you describe what the book is about? Because I know other people have their own descriptions, but what is your description of the book?
um for me the book is really it's an amalgamation of things, but really it's a journey about discovering who you are. It's a journey about understanding who you are in your place in the world. For Titus, there's a lot of issues in the book: racism, sexism, class, historical relevance. But for me, it's really a book about Titus learning that he doesn't have to bear the weight for everybody else. It's a journey of discovery for him. It's an understanding that you can be spiritual without being a part of organized religion. It's an understanding that the person that you're most responsible for is yourself, and that's something that Titus as a character has to learn. Of course he learns that through the prism of a mystery, of a crime novel, but really it's a journey of self-discovery for him. I think that he's in a very different place at the end of the book than he is at the beginning. He feels sometimes like Atlas. He's got all this weight on his shoulders, and as his brother likes to tell him, you don't have to bear that weight. That's not your responsibility.
Absolutely.
And so
And
that's
isn't it something that is in terms of African Americans, when we always talking about how we have to reach back and pull the next person along, and so a lot of people do take that whole weight of everything on their shoulders. I agree with you. He was a totally different person in the end, which leads me to ask you, because you kind of left it open. Are we going to hear more about Titus in the future?
what's funny. I usually don't write a series character. Most of my books are standalone: Razorblade Tears, Blacktop Wasteland, Darkest Prayer. Um, but I think Titus, he's such an it's funny what Titus, when I first started writing the book, I didn't really have a handle on him as a character. It was just he was an avatar for a lot of things I wanted to talk about, and then eventually he became sort of this really compelling character that I may want to revisit someday, just because I do think he has a few more things to say, and that that sort of idea has sort of opened up the idea of maybe revisiting some characters from my other books. I may revisit Blacktop Wasteland, to see what happened to Bug and Kia. And I get that question a lot with my books. Like, the end of Blacktop Wasteland is also sort of open ended. And people always ask me, well, do Bug and Kia, the main characters in the book, do Bug and Kia stay together? Did they make it? And I used to have a very flippant answer. I'm like, I don't know, because I stopped writing at that point, so I'm not sure. And people do not like that answer. So I had to come up with something else.
They want you
But
to live with that character.
I will say that I think there's a strong possibility that Titus may make a reappearance just because I think he has a couple more things to say.
So, how do you start the process? What's your process for writing a book? I mean, I know I read somewhere that you sit down and you're writing, you have a lap desk and you're writing while your wife is watching TV and so forth. But there's got to be a way that the first idea germinates. Where does it come from?
Most of the time, it's something along the lines of I just sit here and I think, wouldn't it be cool if? So, wouldn't it be cool if there was this really great getaway driver who had to return to that life? Or wasn't it be cool if there was this really smart small town sheriff who solved a big crime? Or and so it's always sort of this possibility of what happens if stories that sort of enter my mind, and I want to examine them and see how far I can go with it. And what I do is I write myself a synopsis. I write myself just basically a little story to myself about what I'm interested in, maybe where the story is going to go, and then I use that as sort of a guidepost or map to how I want to do the rest of the book. And sometimes I'll start that process, and the story peters out, and nothing happens, and then other times I start that process, and then something clicks, and I'm very interested in what's going to happen. I always feel like I'm telling myself the story first. And if I can interest myself in it, then hopefully readers will be interested as well.
So there's some parallels in the book in terms of storyline to your actual life, but this is not autobiographical. Or
No, I
is it
mean
just
there's
you
certain things.
pulling from
No, there's
yourself?
certain things in the book that I used to help give Titus a sort of full, nuanced characterization. Like Titus, my mother was disabled when I was young. My mother didn't pass away till a few years ago. Titus lost his mother when he was young. I have a brother, but in real life, my brother's older. I'm the baby. But I grew up in a small town like Titus. I played football and wrestled and stuff in high school. So there's a little bit of me in the book. I guess if you if you had to pin me down, I think Titus is probably me if I was a lot cooler and like 30 pounds lighter. Um,
Well, I thought that Titus was you because as I was reading it, and I was like, okay, just looking at your picture and thinking about some of the things that I read, and I was like, okay, it's coming from somewhere in there. But how do some of the descriptions that you use? First of all, you're a very descriptive writer, which I love because it just takes your mind right there. But I got to tell you, Sean, some of that stuff is so graphic. Why is that in your head? you know, I mean,
it's
like when you're talking about Gabriel and what he winds up doing. I don't want to give away too much of the
right.
book, because I want people to go read it. But why is that in your head?
It's not really though. It's funny. It's only in my head so much as it's a part of the story. And so when I'm sitting there and I'm writing, I think, okay, what's the worst thing I can come up with? What's the most visceral thing? I do write in a very descriptive way. I write from sort of this the five senses methods. I want you to feel the heat in during the day. I want you to,
Mhm.
see what's going on around you in the story. I want you to smell the honeysuckle and the magnolias in the air. And so I try to create this sort of really immersive atmosphere. But a lot of the horrific things in these books and my other books, they don't stay in my head. I had a conversation with Dennis Lehane at a convention, a writing convention last year, and he said that it's hard for him to write novels because he has all this darkness that comes up, that bubbles up that he has to put on the page, and it's hard for him to get away from that. I don't know what this says about him or me, but that doesn't bother me. I'll write something terrible and then I'll go play with my cat. So I don't know whether that makes him more stable or me more stable, but it doesn't stay in my mind. It's funny. The graphic stuff never bothers me, like the violence and stuff. The things that do
Mhm.
affect me, the things I think about, are a lot of times the emotional things.
Yeah.
Bug talking about his dad, or in Raised by Tears, Ike going to his son's grave, or in All the Sinners Bleed, whenever Titus talks about his mom or the relationship between his brother. Those are the things that stay with me, that linger. because I think those are the things that have the most resonance. Another friend of mine who read the early draft of All the Sinners Bleed, she said, Titus, the only time he really laughs is when he's with his brother or he's with his father. And it's because
That's very true.
those are the times that he can take down this persona. I did a lot of research for this book. So I talked to several different African-American police officers, former sheriff. I wanted to get a feel for what it felt like to be an officer, especially in today's climate, especially in a post, after the murder of George Floyd. And how do you feel about being a police officer, and how are you able to sort of balance your commitment to being an officer, but your identity as an African-American? And so a lot of those conversations made their way into the book, and those things also stay with me and resonate a lot as well.
Yeah, because what resonated with me was Titus's description of how he was feeling watching the Confederate soldiers marching through town, and he was describing, what he was feeling on the inside. And I wonder, do you think, as a Southerner, and I have Southern roots also, is that something that we will ever be able to get across to those who believe in what I call revisionist history, but but the actual feeling of seeing people glorify what we know was a horrific time? Do we think that we'll ever be able to get people to empathize to that level?
I don't know. I think there are people. I think if you can have a real conversation with someone, and when I mean real conversation, it's not yelling at someone or someone yelling at you at a town council meeting, but a real honest conversation about what those statues, what that revisionist history, as you call it, is, that sort of myth of the lost cause, what that means. My great great grandmother, 3 times great, was born a slave and was freed. And the stories that she handed down through the generations to us they're so banal. The evil and the horror, it almost becomes commonplace when you listen to her stories, how they just don't understand what it meant to be cattle, what it meant to be property, and how dehumanizing that is. We have there's this whole situation going on in Florida right now where they're trying to create educational standards to say that there was some benefit from slavery. And I don't understand how anybody could sit there with a straight face and say, well, yes, we took your children, we took your wife, we took your daughter, we murdered your sons, we worked you until you died. But, in the end, you learn how to shoe a horse. It's this sort of presumption that African Americans who were enslaved didn't have skills already. These people that were taken
when
from,
they came here with skills.
Yeah, they came
and I mean, all that's been eliminated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They came here with knowledge of irrigation, with agrarian skills, with steel and ironworking skills. And so that's one thing. But then to just have the audacity, the unmitigated gall to tell someone, well, yeah, slavery had benefits. Those type of people, I don't know if you can ever reach them. But I think you have to make it behooves us to make the effort, because in many cases, a lot of people have a background where they weren't properly educated about what slavery was and what the Civil War was. And so, they're repeating the lies that their grandfather or their grandmother told them. And so you can make the attempt, but I think, to paraphrase James Baldwin, we could have the discussion as long as this discussion isn't rooted in your idea that I don't have the right to exist and I don't have the right to feel the way I feel. And so that's why it's a big part of the book, because it's a big part of my life.
Hi, I'm Barbara Ham-Lee from WHRO, and if you're just joining us, we are talking with author S.A. Cosby about his book, All the Sinners Bleed, and a novel. And let's get back to the conversation. So, Sean, do you feel like, and I haven't read your other 2 books, but I'm going to, now that I've read All the Sinners Bleed, because it was fabulous. Do you think that do you feel the necessity to have to always explain race, explain classism in your books? Because, well, I'll give you an example. When George Floyd happened, people reached out to me as a talk show host, wanting to know what to do. And these were Caucasian people asking me what to do, and there was this whole pressure to always explain. Is that our job?
I think I think unfortunately it is the millstone that our nation's history of racial animus has given us. It unfortunately falls to us to sort of to tell these stories, to have these conversations in a way that sort of educate people. You would hope people would want to educate themselves, but a lot of time, I mean, I'm not telling you nothing you don't know. Sometimes people are lazy and
Yeah,
they want you to explain it. I think it was Toni Morrison who said, "It's not my job to explain racism. Go talk to your
yeah,
grandfather. Go talk to your daddy. I have other things to do." And so I think but unfortunately, it does seem to fall to us. For me as a writer, I think, especially as a Southern writer, I think those themes of race, class, religion, sexism, and sexuality are just
mm,
intrinsically tied to Southern fiction. I think the four pillars of Southern fiction are race, class, sex, and religion. If you read William Faulkner or Ernest J. Gaines or Flannery
mm,
O'Connor or Carson McCullers or even Cormac McCarthy and Pat Conroy, or any Southern writer or anyone who identifies, even modern writers like Michael Ferris Smith and Ace Atkins and Jesmyn Ward. Those
mm,
things are just inexorably tied to what we're trying to do as writers and the stories we tell. But that being said, I don't I don't get paid to have a class on racial politics. And so I don't feel it's my responsibility to explain it. Once I talk about it in my books, I think if you read my books, you know my stance and you know where I stand. And also you understand, hopefully if you read my books, what racism and what classism and what, religious extremism has done to the South. So I don't feel
yeah.
any need to further expound upon it when I'm at dinner, having a ham and cheese sandwich. So
But at the same time, if we don't, then don't we also run the risk of, again, the story being changed, told from somebody else's narrative? I
well,
mean,
that's
so
true too.
there's
I
a
mean,
responsibility there.
yeah, I think so too. I think, I think it's one of those things. Talking about race in America as a black person is almost like it's like putting out a campfire. You know, it's yours. You got to do it. You don't want to. You
Yeah,
don't want to take the time to do it, but it falls to us because if we don't do it, like you said, someone else can shift. And you're seeing that right now in real time. People are trying to
yeah,
shift this narrative that slavery wasn't that bad, or that slavery had benefits, or that Jim Crow, wasn't that bad. And so, again, I would rather talk about, fiction and narrative and story structure and the ideas for other books I have, and I would love to have those conversations, but I have to have those race conversations because, again, like you said, if we don't do it, then someone either is not going to have the
yeah.
conversation or they're going to manipulate and revise history.
And changes. So, okay, let's talk about something else then. How come, with all of the stuff that Titus had been through, that he could not have a relationship that lasted?
I
That's
think
not
Titus,
fair. I felt really
I
bad
think
for him.
I think Titus is there's a lot of good things about Titus. He's dependable, he's honest, he's forthright, but there's a lot of stuff, that's broken inside of him. And he's not honest about that. He's not being forthright with himself about what he wants and what he desires. I think the relationship with Darlene is something that Titus feels like he should do. It's not
Yeah,
something that he really wanted to
he
do. And
wanted
I
to.
like that she is the one who calls him to account for that. That she has the agency to confront him with that. He's a hero, he's a protagonist, but he's also human, hopefully. And so he has his flaws, he has his weaknesses. And one of those weaknesses is that he's not emotionally vulnerable. He's not emotionally open. Both the women in his life at one point or another say something to him along those lines that, you should laugh more. You don't smile enough. You're not open enough. And I think that's something, if we see him again, that he'll work on. But I wanted to show that in the book because I wanted I didn't want him to be this sort of robot perfect hero. I wanted him to have his flaws, and I wanted that
Yeah,
flaw to be something that everyone can relate to. I think everyone can relate to that type of person that you have in your life where you love them a little bit more than they love you. I think
Then
we
they
all
love
do.
you. Absolutely.
And
I
so
just felt so bad for him though, because I just wanted him to succeed because he was changing so in all of the other aspects of his life in terms of his growth. So, but
yeah.
anyway, so, so now that you're this big time author and everything, how has Southern living changed for you?
I don't have to pay for desserts when I go out to eat. So that's pretty cool.
Everybody knows your name. Huh?
Everybody wants to buy me a drink or buy me a dessert. That's nice. I think it's so
That's
funny.
nice.
I live in a very small town, and you would think people, because I do write very honestly about the problems of a small town, you would think maybe people wouldn't like that. People love the books. Everybody wants to be killed in one of my books. Everybody, if I'm in a Walmart, that's the number one thing somebody will ask me. Hey, you working on a new book? Yeah. Can I be in it? Can you kill me? Yeah, sure, if you want. I mean, I will say though, coming from a small town that has like a lot of small towns in the South, has a very complicated racial history, I've gotten nothing
Mhm.
but support from folks. Like I like to say, even people that I know didn't like me in high school are proud of the books. And so it's fun. It really is fun to see that support and see that sort of hometown rallying around a hometown son done good. But other than that, I think the biggest thing that's changed for me is I think I grew up really poor. And
Mhm.
so these books have afforded me the opportunity to travel, to see the world, literally. I just got back from
Yeah.
England. I was in Amsterdam earlier this year. Before that, I
Wow.
did a national book tour. I went to like 10 cities in 12 days. Being able to see the world and being able to understand that people have more in common than we have differences. And to see the readers who have really embraced the books, who have really taken the books. They know the books better than I do. So it's like, you know, I have people asking me like, on page 176, when Titus said blankety blank, what are you thinking about? I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't even know what's on page 176.
Exactly. But it's such, as a writer, it's so gratifying and so heartwarming that people really love the books. People have really embraced not just Titus, but all my stories. And as a storyteller, that's the thing you want. Like when you start writing, for me, when I started writing, my only goal was I wanted someone other than my mama to like my books. And that was it. I just wanted someone outside of my family to appreciate my work. And it's just been an incredible, incredible experience.
Do you remember when you first recognized that you wanted to be a writer?
So my
What's the
mother's
story
passed away.
behind that?
Yeah, my mother's passed away. She passed away a couple of years ago, but she used to tell this story that when I was 4 years old, she would tell me fairy tales and bedtime stories, and that I would complain about the plot holes in the stories. So like she would tell me like about the three little pigs, and I would be like, well, why did they build all their houses out of bricks in the first place? And so my mom told me that
So
she
you were one of
encouraged.
those kind of
I
kids.
was one of those kids, yeah. And so my mom said she encouraged me to write my own stories. She said, then you can answer all those questions you want. So when I was 7 or 8, I wrote a story about I wrote a story about these like astronaut gnomes that landed in our backyard in our magnolia tree. And I gave it to my mom. It's a terrible story. It was a terrible story. But she was so impressed that I had come up with it on my own. And I hadn't asked anybody for help, hadn't asked anybody to help me write it. And the look on her face when she was reading it gave me this, I don't know how else to say it. It gave me sort of this euphoric high. Like
Wow.
it was like this sort of psychic connection. Like something I wrote is having an effect on someone else. And from then on, I
Mhm.
was addicted to writing. I didn't want to be anything else. But I like to say, like Steve Harvey, I've had a bunch of different jobs. I've been bad at all of them except writing. So
So, people would say, well, he's this great author. He just started writing and they just picked up his books and he became famous. I think there was a little more to it than that, right?
Oh
How do
yeah,
you
no,
get anything?
I've been writing since way back when you had to send a story, you had to send it with a self-addressed stamped envelope to get it back. So I've been writing before word processors and laptops. No, I've been writing. I sent my first actual story out for consideration when I was 17, and I'll be
Oh
50
wow.
in a few days. And so
Oh, happy
yeah,
birthday
and
early.
so yeah, thank you. So for a long time, I just, I had little spurts of success here, get a story accepted here, get a story accepted there. It took me a long time to find my niche. I started out wanting to write horror stories and sci-fi stories, and I wasn't finding a lot of success. And then when I was 33 or 34, I had a friend who introduced me to a gentleman named Todd Robinson from New York City, who published a quarterly magazine of crime stories called Thug Lit. And she was this is a true story, I swear to God. She's a belly dancer, and she had gone to New
Oh
York
wow.
City and done a show. And after the show, she had gone to this bar in the village, in Greenwich Village. And Todd, in addition to being a writer and an editor, also manages a bar. And they got to talking, and when she came home, she said, "Yeah, I met this guy. He publishes a crime fiction magazine, and he pays like 50 or $100, and you should send him a story." And I really needed that money, and so
Wow.
I wrote
Yeah.
this crime story, and he accepted it and published it, and that was sort of the beginning of my writing career. It was like finding crime fiction just clicked. I'd always been a fan of crime fiction. I grew up reading Agatha Christie and Raymond Chandler and Chester Himes and Ross McDonald and John D. McDonald and Dorothy L. Sayers and P.D. James and
Wow.
Walter Mosley and all those folks. But I'd never written crime fiction or thought about writing it because I come from a small town. They tell you write what you know. Well, I'm a small town. It's never a who done it. Like we always know who did it. It's just can you prove it? And so
The question is whether you're gonna call them out or not.
exactly. And so I didn't know if people would be interested in those stories. But then I started reading rural crime fiction like Daniel Woodrell, and rural fiction in general, like Jessamine Ward. I said, well, there's an avenue there that I can pursue. And it sort of took off from there, I mean, the last 7 years, if you had told me previous to the last 7 years that all the things that would, you're going to be on Obama's list twice, you're going to be a New York Times bestseller, you're going to be on Tonight Show and all these things, I never would have believed it because it never seemed possible. The only thing that I really believed was that I was a pretty good writer. I didn't think I was the best. I still don't. But I thought I was pretty good. I think, here's the thing. Somebody can teach you the mechanics of writing. They can teach you verb subject agreement. They can teach you not to write in a passive voice. Can't teach you how to be a storyteller. You either are or you're on. And I grew up in a
Yeah.
family of storytellers. And so I knew I had that going for me. But, like with everything, a lot of your career is opportunity meets execution meets luck. And I had a lot of all three of those.
So you've listed a lot of authors that you've read and so forth. I'm assuming you spend a lot of time in the library.
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
have a
Yeah.
favorite library? Since
Oh, yeah.
since you're presenting for the Library of Congress, I figured I
Yes.
better talk about some of the smaller
So
libraries.
my local library is the Matthews Memorial Library in Matthews County, Virginia. Smallest town, smallest county in the state, 8,000 people. I know all of them. Um, and so I would ride my bicycle to the library because, like I said, I grew up poor. My mom was a single mom, and she was disabled, so she didn't work very much at all. And so I'd ride my bicycle down to the library on Saturdays. And on Saturdays, they sold old books, so you could get 5 paperbacks for $1. And I would go down there and buy books from the used book rack, but also, the librarians would just, I could rent as many books as I could carry. So I'd kick my backpack and I'd rent all these different books and check them out. Libraries are such an incredible bastion of knowledge and education and entertainment, especially for folks that are in lower income situations like I was, because not everybody can afford to go to a nice fancy bookstore and buy a bunch of books. And as a kid, the library was sort of this gateway to just all these different worlds that I could explore. One of my favorite memories are being in the library, like I said, on Saturday morning, sitting at one of the tables and back, just reading by myself, and sort of
Um,
broadening my mind in a way that I don't think people understand unless you've been in that situation.
I can so relate to that because I remember when in Baltimore, where I grew up, when you got to the fifth grade, you were allowed to check out 10 books. And every week I would be at the library, I'd check out my books, and I would curl up on the couch with a bowl of apples and
Yeah,
just read. So I definitely understand.
my
So we are
family was
almost
my family were big readers too. Like my mom read
uh,
Greek mythology and historical novels and biographies.
mhm.
My uncle read Travis McGee novels by John D. McDonald. My grandmother read romance novels, which I would sneak and read them, but they weren't, as a kid, you think they're gonna be salacious, but when they use
Yeah.
like really big words to describe things. And so you just gotta keep running back to the dictionary and like, oh, what does tumescent mean? Oh, okay.
Now I get it.
Yeah, and then my aunt
So,
read horror novels, and she used to always tease me. She
oh,
was like, "I'm gonna give you this book. If it don't let it scare you, because I don't want your mama mad at me." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm fine." And I remember she gave me Salem's Lot, and she's like, "All right, I'm gonna give you this book. Are you gonna be able to read it?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'll be fine." I think I was 12. Book scared me to death. I slept with a popsicle crucifix underneath my pillow for like a month after I read that book. So
oh, that is hilarious. So as we start to wrap up, what words of advice do you have for people out there who are listening to this and going, I want to get where he is. I really have been trying this writing thing. And do I keep up with it? What do I do? Give them some advice.
I think there's a couple things that somebody told me. So this doesn't originate with Sean. I'm not the wise guru on the mountain. But one thing that I learned is you just have to read a lot. Reading a lot when you're an aspiring writer will help you find what things you can do and what things you feel like you can excel at, and other things that are not in your wheelhouse. And that's important to know what your limitations are. Limitations don't mean that you quit. Limitations mean you focus on your strengths. And so for me, I learned early on that like dialogue was one of the things I was really good at. I learned early on that characterization was one of the things I was really good at. I wasn't that great at romantic situations, as you can see from All Sinners Bleed. And so, but you learn to get better at it. The other thing I think is important, and this is the thing that people don't talk about a lot. Writing is an art. Getting published is a business. And if you want to get published, you have to be really good at the art, but then you have to go to where the publishers are. So, you have to go to conventions, go to writing groups, join a writing circle, go to any type of writing convention or symposium like the Washington Independent Book Review, which is pretty inexpensive. If you live in the DMV, that's a great place to go and meet publishers, meet editors, meet agents. You have to go where the people are. I don't care who you are as a writer. You can be Dostoevsky. Nobody's coming to your house to ask you the privilege of publishing your books. So you really have to put yourself out there. And I know a lot of writers are introverts, and it's difficult, but trust me, the juice is worth the squeeze. And
Absolutely.
if you want to get there, that's the best way I can. That's what someone told me, and that's what worked for me.
And so we should also tell them to come to the Library of Congress National Book Fair that's
Oh yeah,
coming up
definitely.
on the
I'll
12th,
be
right?
there. I'm gonna be there on the 12th, and I'll be butting around and talking and telling stories, and I'm so honored, to be a part of that program. The Library of Congress, I think a society is only as good as the stories it tells about itself, and the Library of Congress is where our best stories are kept.
Okay. And just one final question. So you've traveled all over the world. You have all these opportunities now. Are you going to stay as you called yourself? What did you call yourself? You are a uh, Southerner born and bred. Are you going to continue to be a Southerner born and bred?
I can't be nothing but. That's right down to my boots. That's who I am, and I think my mama always said the shine wears off of new pennies quick, and so you can't change who you are. You just gotta enjoy the moments that you have. I am really enjoying the moment right now. I ain't gonna lie, but at the same time, I don't let it change me. I've been like I said, I've been all over the world. I've been blessed to be on bestseller lists and presidential lists, and I've been on television and stuff. But at the end of the day, I still like, being here in my small town and, hanging out with my cat or walking down through the woods and or having a little sip of moonshine with my brother on the back deck. Those are things that are important.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, S.A. Cosby. And I really, really appreciate this conversation. I want to invite Heather back into our conversation. And hi, Heather. I hope you had a good time. I love this conversation.
It was such a great conversation, Barbara. Thank you for guiding the conversation, for so many thought-provoking and fun questions. Sean, thank you for your master storytelling and for your extraordinary creativity and for putting out the campfire for everyone who needed you to. It's been really wonderful to hear your banter back and forth, you guys. It's really wonderful. So thank you both. Extraordinarily
You're very
honored to have
welcome.
you on PBS.
And Sean, I will tell you, I will be calling you because I've got to have you on as a guest of Another View. Okay.
I would love to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just a reminder out there for everyone, if you live in the Washington, D.C. area, now through August 31st, you can still see us promoting the August 12th National Book Festival. It goes all day, but our programs leading up to that are happening now. Well, I always like to thank my library partners, more than 1,800 strong, as well as numerous PBS stations throughout the country. But most importantly, we'd like to thank all of you for joining us. Until next time, I'm Heather Marie Montilla, and happy reading.